Hey guys, what's up, it's Zyflin here, and today I wanted to make a video giving you guys a few tips and tricks on how to improve your aim in Apex Legends and other first-person shooters like it. I'm making this video because I'm really enjoying Apex Legends, but I find myself getting into scenarios where I should be dead, but I'm not dying because the enemies just can't aim. I'm going to be trying to keep these tips and tricks as basic as possible so they apply to all platforms, but with that being said, let's get right into them. Tip number 1, work on your crosshair placement. In a game like Apex Legends, looting is a massive part of the gameplay experience, but because this is a first-person shooter, to loot things you have to actively look down at the items that you want to pick up. I see a lot of players in-game and on Twitch running around constantly looking at the floor after they loot. The reason this is a big problem is because if your crosshair is not placed anywhere near where the enemies may potentially come from, if they come around the corner and they are looking towards you, they're going to be more likely to get the first couple of shots in and then win the inevitable gunfight unless you're crazy good at movement or managing your abilities. To improve your crosshair placement, I recommend recording your gameplay and watching it back so you can see if you have to improve, and then if you do have to improve, use the world around you as a guideline on where your crosshair should be placed. Have your crosshair placed at about chest or head height at corners or areas that you think the enemies are going to come from. Or even play Blood Hunter. His abilities allow you to highlight enemies through surfaces, so it should teach you a little bit about the positioning of your crosshair, implying you're using his abilities correctly. Tip number 2, practice the 2 different types of aiming, tracking, and snapping. Tracking is your ability to track and shoot at a target while they are moving, where snapping is your ability to quickly snap to an enemy's chest or head with the likes of a high damage weapon such as the Wingman, for example. Practicing one method of aiming will improve the other and vice versa, but how exactly do you practice tracking an enemy or snapping to their head or chest without actually just playing the game? You could just jump into a training session to practice snapping to the practice target's chest and head with the Wingman, or practice continually firing at the moving square targets with a full auto weapon, but that doesn't really feel the same as when you're actually playing the game. So the answer to the question, how do I improve my snapping and tracking aim, is to get comfortable and find a comfortable sensitivity for you. A big trap that I see a lot of players fall into is just copying pro players or YouTubers' settings. Pro players and YouTubers have extremely fancy setups. I myself, for example, have a huge desk with a huge mouse mat, which enables me to use a low DPI and a low sensitivity to make more precise movements and flicks because I have so much free space to move my mouse around. Maybe you play on console, maybe you don't have a gaming mouse or mouse mat, maybe you don't have a huge desk. Copying another person's settings is like trying to copy someone else's diet. Copying them exactly probably won't work for you, but using them as a general guideline is a-okay. Find the player that you want to aim like. Ask yourself, do you want to be better at snapping the targets using that high damage weapon like a Wingman or a sniper rifle, or do you want to be better at close quarter combat and tracking? Look for those players who gravitate towards those playstyles and use those players' settings and setups as a general guideline until you find a comfortable sensitivity and setup for yourself. Same goes for console. I recommend looking up some professional console players. Tip number 3, learn the spray patterns of all of the weapons. A crucial part to actually landing your shots is knowing how to compensate for the recoil that all of the weapons give off while you hold down the trigger. Every weapon will have their own unique spray control pattern that you're going to get more used to the more you use the weapon. The best way to learn and compensate for the different recoil patterns that the weapons have is to load up into training, shoot into a wall, and then move your mouse or thumbstick slightly in the opposite direction to the recoil. This way, the spread of the bullets is going to be a lot tighter, meaning you're most likely going to land more shots. This only really applies when you're aiming down sights though, so don't worry too much about it whenever you're spraying from the hip. Keep your crosshairs on the enemies and you should be good to go. Tip number 4, practice before you play. A lot of people just log on and start playing, they get into a gunfight and realize, hey, I can't hit anything right now. The first loss of the day really takes a hit to your attitude towards the following games because you've probably convinced yourself that you're not doing too well in the aim department, so you're less likely to take fights that you otherwise would win. Jumping into your first match unprepared, missing shots, and then losing is going to take a huge hit to your confidence, making you play a lot safer and less aggressive when you need to be. Jump into the training mode, pick up a Wingman, and get yourself familiar with the sensitivity and controls that you have set every single day before starting a match. Convince yourself, no matter how long that it takes in the training mode, that your aim and control is of an acceptable level today, and then start playing. Tip number 5, ensure that your game is running at the highest frame rate that it can. Now this tip mainly applies to PC players, but it's extremely important for those of you who are playing on PC to make sure that you're getting the highest frame rate possible by turning down or off any and all unnecessary video settings that you have got turned up. The only two settings that I have set to max are my adaptive resolution target, which I have set to 100, and model details set to high. Everything else is either turned off or set to its lowest value. Tip number 6, train your aim to be reactive. Training your aim to be reactive means that you should not have to think about what movement you have to do to aim where you want to. It should just become part of your muscle memory. To establish this muscle memory in either your thumbs if you're playing on controller or hand if you're playing on keyboard and mouse, you have to select a sensitivity and DPI and keep it consistent to allow it to develop while you play. Practice really does make perfect when it comes to this tip, so don't keep on tinkering with your settings. Take the time to figure out what works best for you and then stick with it. Tip number 7, practice against moving targets in different games. This tip does require you to hop off Apex Legends and onto another game. God forgive me for suggesting that, I know, but it's extremely beneficial to jump onto other games like CSGO and start up a lobby full of bots and just practice shooting them as they move. Of course, the player models and shooting mechanics aren't going to be the exact same, but you can practice the two different types of aiming, tracking, and snapping that we mentioned earlier versus these bots as they're moving, and I guarantee you that it'll make it a lot easier snapping or tracking targets in Apex if you do about 15 minutes of practice on CSGO versus these bots before you boot up Apex. Tip number 8, find weapon sights that work for you. The optics that you use on your weapons in Apex Legends, in my opinion, is 100% personal preference. Of course, there are going to be different optics that are better for different situations and different weapons. For example, if your squad's approach is to keep your distance between you and your enemies, you may want to opt for a longer range optic like a 48x scope, but if your approach is to fight up close, you may just want a simple 1x red dot sight instead. Regardless of which scenario you choose, you're going to have a preference on which optic sight to use on which weapons, so make sure to only use and practice with the ones that you like. It may also be a good idea to practice with the other ones just in case you're forced into using them, but generally as your aim improves over time by practicing with the ones that you like, you should be living long enough to always be able to get the one that you prefer. Tip number 9, find all of the attachments for your weapons. This one should be pretty self-explanatory, but for those of you who don't understand, finding the right attachments for your weapons will improve their overall handling, making them more efficient to use. For example, finding an extended mag for your weapon increases the amount of bullets that you have in one magazine, meaning you can put more shots on target as you're tracking or snapping to them. Tip number 10, our last tip, is don't be afraid to shoot. I see a lot of players playing or streaming on Twitch who have their shots perfectly lined up in their crosshair or while they're aiming down sights, and they're just hesitant to shoot. So what if you miss a few shots? That's perfectly okay. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, and that's not just the same for opportunities in real life. Funnily enough, it applies to shooters as well. Don't be afraid to shoot, but also don't shoot so much that you give away your own and your squad's position away. But that is it for my 10 tips to improve your aim in Apex Legends and other shooters. If you want to catch me live streaming this game, I'll be live a lot next week over at twitch.tv/iflin after I do what I want to do on Anthem, which is releasing on Thursday for me. So I have that to look forward to, but until then, I'm going to keep on no-lifing Apex Legends. More Apex Legends videos to come. I think in the next coming days, I'll post videos covering the best weapons and heroes to pick, maybe even some tips on how to get more wins, so go ahead and hit subscribe if you're interested in any of those things. Like this video if you liked it, it really helps out a lot, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video, and if not then, maybe sometime in Twitch chat. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. so easy.